The result of the debate was a victory for common sense. It had wider implications than just the Conservative Party, not all of which we were aware of at the time. A week after the conference, Mary Holland reported for the BBC programme On the Record.
Sunday lunch at a pleasant seaside resort in Northern Ireland. A long way from the familiar television pictures of bombs and burning streets in Belfast. Northern Ireland isn't all slums and violence. A lot of people have done very nicely out of the Thatcher years. Anywhere else in the United Kingdom, these people would almost certainly vote Conservative. They can't do that because the Conservative Party doesn't put up candidates in Northern Ireland. But that may be about to change, and 60 years of history with it. Since Northern Ireland was established in 1921, none of the mainland parties has organised here. Politics has been run almost entirely on sectarian lines, with Protestants voting Unionist and Catholics supporting nationalist parties. But here in North Down, admirers of Mrs. Thatcher have not only formed an unofficial Conservative Party, they have won seats on the local council. Their leader is Dr. Lawrence Kennedy.
I think North Down would be considered perhaps the most natural Conservative constituency in Northern Ireland. But I think the Conservative Party is no longer simply the party of the rich suburbs. I think Thatcherism has changed that, and I think there are many areas of Northern Ireland where people would be interested in voting Conservative, as well as North Down.
Lawrence Kennedy and his supporters have waged a lonely campaign, taking the Conservative message to the streets and schoolrooms of North Down.
I've been interested over the last few years in trying to bring Conservative politics to Northern Ireland.
Dr. Kennedy's aim is to persuade Mrs. Thatcher and the National Conservative Party, which up to now has refused to organise in Northern Ireland, to campaign here. But even in North Down, there's some scepticism about the practicality of this.
You mentioned earlier on, do you like to see Miss Thatcher coming to Northern Ireland? Could you honestly see her coming and canvassing in West Belfast?
Well, the West Belfast constituency is part of Westminster. And I've seen Conservative Party leaders canvassing in all sorts of constituencies.
Here in West Belfast, the voters elect a Sinn Féin MP who supports the IRA. The strength of traditional loyalties is evident on the streets. Could there really be any future for British national parties here, where tribal feelings are so intense? Dr. Kennedy works in the heart of the Falls Road in West Belfast.
I'm not for a minute suggesting that the Conservative Party will walk in and win West Belfast, but there was an opinion poll earlier this year in February which showed that 25% of current Sinn Féin voters would like the opportunity to vote for national parties. I certainly do know that people in West Belfast are just as interested in matters like taxation, the way the health service is organised, the way their children are educated, these socio-economic issues.
In South Belfast, where the BMWs jostle the Volvos in the church car park at Sunday Mass, there may be more chance of establishing the Conservatives as a non-sectarian party capable of winning votes across the sectarian divide.
I know that many people in the Catholic community would be very anxious to move away from the orange and green perpetual confrontation, and anything which gives them an opportunity to do that might very well be welcomed by members of the Catholic community.
Depending, of course, on what areas they stand in, certainly in an area like this, they possibly would get votes, yes.
Conservative Party, the Labour Party have never put candidates up here, and one would have thought that the time maybe was overdue.
The Prime Minister herself has described Northern Ireland as being as British as Finchley. If that's the case, the argument goes, why shouldn't people who live in South Belfast have the opportunity to vote Conservative? At Blackpool last week, the point was made forcefully from the floor in a lively debate.
The time is now for the people of Northern Ireland to be allowed to be members of this party. to work for it, to vote for it, and to vote for the party of government. How can it be right for people living in Paris or Brussels? They can join the Conservative Party, but not if they live in Belfast or North Down. This is not right.
After the overwhelming vote to admit the North Down Tories to the Conservative Party, came the celebrations. And congratulations from two Northern Ireland ministers, John Cope and Brian Mulwiney. Ian Gow, a staunch defender of the union, is delighted.
The decision to grant affiliation is one of very momentous consequence for politics in Northern Ireland, because we are now going to bring Northern Ireland more into the mainstream of British politics, which is exactly what I want to see.
But not all Conservatives share the joy of the North Down Tories. There are serious political reasons why the party has refused up to now to organise in Northern Ireland. And those won't go away just because Conference has voted so overwhelmingly to admit the North Down Conservatives. Peter Temple-Morris is chairman of a joint council of British and Irish MPs.
I think that the government is likely to be embarrassed. I would certainly be embarrassed by this if I were government, because if the name of the game is active Conservative participation, that means that at the end of the day, the Prime Minister, the Chairman of the party, and everybody else will be expected to bang the drum, and not only in North Down, but right through perhaps more controversial and somewhat bitter areas of Northern Ireland. And that means that we come right off any fence that we might be trying to sit on. We're no longer arbitrators, no longer referees, but active participants.
That could jeopardise the role of the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, according to Merlin Rees, who held the post.
The role is different from being a cabinet minister in the other parts of the United Kingdom. You get deeply involved. You mustn't be strongly on one side or the other. I suppose the nearest phrase I can get to is one is an honest broker trying to be objective in a subjective place.
This is particularly true when the Secretary of State, now Peter Brooke, tries to bring the opposing factions together to discuss the form of future government.
The Secretary of States in the past have always indicated impartiality in the round table conferences. If that round table includes elected representatives from a Conservative party in Northern Ireland, then he can no longer claim that position.
If the Conservatives organise in Northern Ireland, it could also cause problems internationally. For a start, it would send the wrong signals to Dublin. At the moment, the Anglo-Irish Agreement, signed by Mrs. Thatcher, commits the government to a delicate, non-partisan role in Northern Ireland in exchange for help from the Irish government in the fight against terrorism. Article 1 of the agreement lays out that the union between Northern Ireland and Britain will remain as long as a majority in the province want it. But if in the future that changes and there's a majority for a united Ireland, the British won't stand in the way. The decision by the Tories to organise in Northern Ireland will almost certainly be seen by the Irish government as a move towards integrating Northern Ireland more closely into the United Kingdom, at a time when Dublin is already angry about recent security leaks. Desmond O'Malley is a minister in Charles Haughey's government and leader of the Progressive Democrats.
I think nationalists on both sides of the Irish border will probably see it as contrary to the recognition of the nationalist aspiration which is contained in the Anglo-Irish Agreement. And I think they'll be somewhat mystified as to why it should happen at this time. And I think that it will unfortunately raise suspicions. And, you know, we've enough suspicions just at the moment. For that reason, I think it's somewhat insensitive.
It isn't only the Irish government which is likely to be suspicious of the Conservatives' decision to organise in Northern Ireland. Such a move will increase pressure on the Labour Party to do likewise, and at the moment, Labour is adamantly opposed to the idea.
There's a degree of wishful thinking in all this, that somehow the Conservative Party and the Labour Party organised in Northern Ireland to be a magic wand, all the sectarian and other problems will all disappear overnight, and that's a load of rubbish. They will still be there. Probably the question of organising will compound and inflame those problems rather than seeking the solution of them, which must be found within Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland itself, won't be found by British parties organising it.
But despite Mr McNamara's assertion that the Labour Party will not organise in Northern Ireland, there's pressure on the party, particularly from sections of the trade union movement. At the party conference in Brighton, the campaign for Labour representation was lobbying delegates going into the conference hall. This little group is campaigning for the Labour Party to organise in Northern Ireland outside the security barriers at the Labour Party conference. They look a bit pathetic, but this is the position in which the North Down Tories found themselves at Conservative Party conferences just 3 short years ago. Their fortunes may be changing. At a fringe meeting in Brighton, one of Labour's rising stars, MP Kate Hoey, spoke of her belief that it was time for a change.
I used to walk into conference every year and hear people talking about why are you banning us from joining the party, and I never really thought about it until I actually realised in a very sort of personal position where my own brother, who was at university in England, has gone back to Northern Ireland, was in the Labour Party here, gone back to Northern Ireland. What party does he join? And I just think a lot of people look at it from a purely democratic way, and in a simple form, they would say that this is a way forward. It's not necessarily a panacea for the end of sectarianism, but it's a start.
And once the Conservatives decide to put up candidates, will the Labour Party be able to resist that kind of plea? In a pub in Belfast, a group of trade unionists took comfort from the Conservative Party's change of heart.
There is a lot of union members in the country that want to vote for Labour, and I don't think that people in England actually know that we cannot vote or we cannot join the Labour Party. And I think if the people in England know that we're not allowed to join the Labour Party, then pressure can be put on from England, you know.
I think the other thing, George, is that there's the cuts of 60,000 members that actually contract in, union members that actually contract in to pay the political levy to Labour, and they can't actually join the party. So there's a good groundswell of support to build on there, you know.
Certainly, I think after 10 years of Thatcherism, 10 years of anti-working class policies, the ordinary rank and file trade union member in Northern Ireland has finally woken up to the fact that the political arm of the trade union movement is the Labour Party, and the only way we can have any redress is through being able to vote, to join and vote for the Labour Party.
But it is pretty frustrating for activists, Labour Party activists or would-be Labour Party activists, to watch the annual conference and be told by opinion polls and the party leadership they are going to the next government. And yet what can we do?
Labour's official policy of encouraging Irish unity by consent is unlikely to attract many Protestant voters. Here in East Belfast, the shipyard workers at Harland and Wolff are staunchly loyalist. So could the Labour Party ever hope to win their votes? The chief trade union convener at the shipyard is Peter Williamson.
I think a lot of people would vote Labour if they had the opportunity. If the opportunity was there for them to vote in the mainstream politics. People now are seeing the Conservative government with their cuts in the health, new industrial laws, their DHSS changes. People are starting to understand in Northern Ireland the Conservative government's policy, and that policy is costing jobs.
So have the North Down Tories started something which may be beyond the power of either the Conservative Party or Labour to control? Is this a political idea whose time has come? At the moment, both parties probably wish that the North Down Tories, having had their moment of glory here at Blackpool, would simply go back home to Northern Ireland and forget about the whole thing. But the mood at conference has shown that that isn't going to happen. The North Down Conservatives have worked very hard to gain admission.
After all this, what then happened? Well, the Conservative Party agreed to allow the people of Northern Ireland to become members of the party. Ian Gow, MP, was made the president of the South Belfast Conservative Association. In July 1990, he was assassinated at his home by the Provisional IRA. I had the honour to follow him as president of South Belfast. The party members campaigned hard for the 1992 general election, without any help from Conservative Central Office. I raised this issue at the 1991 Conservative Party conference,
and got a positive response from the party chairman, Chris Patten.
And from the rostrum. John Strafford is the Wessex Area Treasurer. He's a chartered accountant and he'll speak for the motion.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, this motion calls for the renewed effort to set out and promote our vision for the 1990s. But it is not just renewed effort that is required, but other things as well. We must improve our organisation in the constituencies. We must improve our organisation at Conservative Central Office. And looking at the party's accounts, we must improve the income of the party, and we must improve the ways in which the control of expenditure of that hard-earned income is spent. We must have democratic accountability within the Conservative Party. We need to plan not just for the next general election, but for the general election after that as well. And with this in mind, I hope that Chris Patten will serve a term of 5 years as party chairman. All those in favour, please show. That's democracy. We need to raise our horizons, to tell the people of our successes. You know, Chairman, 2 years ago, at this conference, the grassroots of this party, you people here, we took a decision, a historic decision, regarding organising the party in Northern Ireland. What has happened since then? In Northern Ireland, 11 Conservative associations have been set up. We have seen Conservative councillors elected in North Down, Lisbon, Carrickfergus, Larne and Coleraine. We have seen an area council set up, and it is time, Sir Basil, that that area council was recognised by the National Union. We have seen quota being paid by the Northern Ireland constituencies to Central Office, and all this without an area office. Contrast all this activity with that of the Labour Party, who harbour their troops-out supporters that share platforms with members of Sinn Féin. At the Labour conference last week, it decided that the Labour Party will not organise in Northern Ireland. Not surprising, really, for Labour Party policy is to give away Northern Ireland, to break up the United Kingdom. I can think of no more shameful a policy of any political party that aspires to govern this nation. But do not worry, because at the next general election, the people of this nation will dump that policy into the dustbin of history, together with all Labour policies, together with the Labour Party itself. This motion asks us to set out our vision for the 1990s. Let me set out my little vision for Northern Ireland. Chris Patten said on Tuesday that we must trust the people, and that includes the people of Northern Ireland. The time has come to give democracy back to the people, to treat it like any other part of the United Kingdom. And there are a couple of simple steps we could start with. First of all, we could add Northern Ireland to Michael Heseltine's review of local government. And dare I say it, let the Irish Republic have no more say in the internal affairs of Northern Ireland than the government of the United Kingdom has a say in the internal affairs of the Irish Republic. Chairman, the United Kingdom is a family, and when a member of the family is going through trouble and strife, we help them by saying to that member, we love you. Let this conference, let this party, let this government say to the British people, but in particular to the people of Northern Ireland, we love you. Your cause is our cause, and together we will win.
Chairman of the party organisation to reply.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Joe, I first of all want to congratulate you on the way you've chaired our conference this week. I know others will be doing it more eloquently later on in the day, but I just wanted to thank you personally for the direct and sensible and extremely competent way in which you've managed our proceedings. Thank you very much indeed. I greatly enjoyed all those speeches, and if I may say so, I particularly enjoyed the speech from John Strafford. I welcome John's suggestion that we do need a full dialogue in the party about the future funding of the party and about our future organisation. And I'll come back to that point a little bit later, if I may. I also very much sympathise with much of what John said about Northern Ireland, a beautiful part of our United Kingdom where I was privileged to spend 2 years as a minister. I have always believed and believed passionately in the importance of the Conservative Party standing and fighting and winning in every part of the United Kingdom. I've been to speak in support of the Conservative Party in Northern Ireland and will go and speak and campaign again. I went to campaign in the Upper Bann by-election for our excellent candidate Colette there, and I'll always remember that because it was the last time that I saw the funniest man I've ever known and the nicest and bravest, Ian Gow. I don't wish there to be any doubt at all. We want Conservative councillors in Northern Ireland. We want Conservative members of Parliament from Northern Ireland. I've never seen how we can tell people in Northern Ireland they should behave like the rest of us and then denying them the opportunity for voting Conservative or Labour at a general election. I did take one exception to what John said. I wasn't entirely convinced by that exercise in guided democracy. You'll be hearing from my solicitors later. I thought there were one or two hands that went up a trifle reluctantly, and we have taken names and addresses for future reference. But the really serious point that John made, and it's one that I want to come back to, is that we cannot go on taking party organisations seriously for the 6 months before an election and forget about it for the 4.5 years afterwards. I was working out last night, I guess a number of you do the same thing. I was working out last night how many party conferences I'd been to, and I got to just over 20 before running out of recollections. But the first party conference that I came to was here, and I can remember standing over there under the gallery and not talking, not because I was particularly well behaved, but because the man speaking, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him, the man speaking was Ian MacLeod. It was a speech in which he talked about Conservatives bringing together, and it's a quote which the Prime Minister has used a number of times, bringing together efficiency and justice. And I guess when a lot of us look back over the speeches that we've heard and the speeches that have really impressed us, Ian MacLeod appears again and again in that sort of personal anthology. Greatest peroration I've ever heard was Ian's at one conference when he said, and some of you I guess were there, the Liberals can dream their dreams, the Socialists can scheme their schemes, but we have work to do. It was true then, and my goodness, it's true again today. All those years that I've been coming to conferences, and I tell you this, I cannot remember a year when the hall was fuller for debate after debate. It's a far cry from the great open spaces at last week's Labour conference, great open spaces isn't, of course, a reference to the mental abilities of our opponents. Nor, if I can engage a bit in that sort of flattery of the audience, which always goes down particularly well with an audience, nor can I remember a year when the speeches from the body of the Kirk were better.
In the 1992 general election, Dr. Lawrence Kennedy stood as the official Conservative candidate in North Down. He came within 4,000 votes of winning the seat. Later, his wife and children were held hostage by the IRA at his home in Northern Ireland, in which I had stayed with them on my visits there. The IRA told his wife that they were waiting for Lawrence to return home so they could murder him. Fortunately, she was able to raise the alarm after some hours of terror, and the IRA thugs were captured. They were given lengthy prison sentences, but were released under Tony Blair's Belfast Agreement. Dr. Kennedy requested 24-hour security for himself and his family, and shamefully, the Conservative government refused to give it to him. The stress on his family forced him to leave Northern Ireland, and today he practices medicine in the United States. Peter Temple Morris, who was a critic of the Conservatives in Northern Ireland, left the Conservative Party in 1998 and joined the Labour Party. Tony Blair gave him a peerage in 2001. Throughout the 1990s, the Conservatives received no help whatsoever from Conservative Centre Office. What was not known at the time, but came to light later, was that the Conservative government were, under John Major, holding secret talks with the IRA. And he was under great pressure from the Irish government in Dublin not to give any encouragement to the Conservatives in Northern Ireland. I was honoured to be made an Honorary Vice President of the North Down Conservative Association and also an Honorary Vice President of the Northern Ireland Conservatives. Today, the Conservatives still organise in Northern Ireland, but for the reasons mentioned, never had the breakthrough that at one time seemed possible. One day they will, and when that happens, we will know that at last the
the sectarianism that has been taken out of the politics of Northern Ireland. The sooner that happens, the better.